Hello and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Shoboale. On the program this week, residents in the city of Mariupol speak of the horrors faced amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine as Ukrainian authorities warn of Moscow's possible use of chemical weapons. The biggest prize for Russia to capture in the Donbass region is Mariupol, the main eastern port, where thousands of people are believed to have died under a 7-week siege. Mariupol had been under heavy fire from Russian forces since soon after the war began on February the 24th. The port city is the biggest Ukrainian city on the Sea of Azov. Ukrainian forces had vowed to protect the city to the last soldier.
Mariupol residents wait in long queues to receive deliveries of humanitarian aid supplied by Russia. The aid, mostly food and water, was distributed in a former shopping center that had been damaged in the battle for the city.
They gave us oats, vegetable oil, canned fish, canned meat, and condensed milk. With our houses destroyed, we cook outside. We collect firewood, one wood chip at a time, get water from a pond. My house was blown up. I'm standing here in front of you. That's basically all I have. I have absolutely nothing, just a blown up house.
The southern Ukrainian port, once a city of 400,000 people, has been the scene of fierce fighting between Russian forces and the city's Ukrainian defenders. Large swathes of the city have been heavily damaged, with residential districts left in ruins. Thousands of people have been hiding in basements with no running water, food, medicine or power, and unable or unwilling to leave. Evacuees who make it out, usually after an arduous and dangerous journey by car or bus, tell of a ruined wasteland of rubble without power or heating, where people cook on open fires and drink rainwater or melted snow.
No one was expecting it. It was such hell. I can't express it. People didn't leave their basements for weeks. They cooked food on the ground. I really want to go home, but it's destroyed. The home I put my whole soul into, where I lived my whole life.
We were looking for snow to melt it somehow, to have water to wash our hands. We caught a cold in the basements because we were sleeping just on cement. I didn't believe until the last moment that this could happen to my city.
We didn't know what to do because the shelling was everywhere, it's still under shelling already, and it's airstrikes, everything is exploding in the city. And we decided if we will die, we will die and meet it in face. So instead of hiding, because we stayed underground more than 2 weeks.
Ukraine has vowed to defend the Mariupol down to the last soldier and has called for more help from allies.
The battle for Donbass will remind you of Second World War, with large operations, maneuvers, involvement of thousands of tanks, armored vehicles, planes, artillery. This will not be a local operation based on what we see in Russia's preparations to it. Either you help us now, and I'm speaking about days, not weeks, or your help will come too late. And many people will die, many civilians will lose their homes, many villages will be destroyed, exactly because this help came too late. Unfortunately, to my deepest regret, Bucha massacre is just the tip of the iceberg. We already see from reports from Mariupol that Mariupol is much, much worse on all accounts.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky on Monday said there is nothing left of the city. Addressing South Korean lawmakers, he pleaded for military aid. He also raised the possibility of Russian forces using chemical weapons and said tens of thousands of people have likely been killed in Mariupol. If confirmed, it would be by far the largest number of dead so far reported in one place in Ukraine.
Thank you very much. So we've got a full program.
Meanwhile, the US and Britain said on Tuesday that they were looking into the reports about Russia's use of chemical weapons.
We had credible information that Russian forces may use a variety of riot control agents, including tear gas, mixed with chemical agents that would cause stronger symptoms, to weaken and incapacitate entrenched Ukrainian fighters and civilians as part of the aggressive campaign to take Mariupol. We share that information with Ukraine as well as with other partners, and we're in direct conversation with partners to try to determine what actually has happened. So this is a real concern. It's a concern that we had from before the aggression started. I think I pointed to the possibility that these kinds of weapons would be used.
To be clear, we are working urgently to understand whether or not chemical weapons have been used. And if they have, as the Foreign Secretary has said, the people responsible will be held to account. The use of chemical weapons is abhorrent. It does cross a line, and all options are on the table for how we would respond.
After withdrawing forces from northern Ukraine, including suburbs of Kiev, laying to waste under its occupation, Russia now says its main objective is eastern Ukraine. It is demanding Kiev cede control of swathes of territory there, known as the Donbass separatist fighters. Kiev says it is grinding for a new battle. If Russia finally captures Mariupol, it could better link troops advancing from the east with those from Crimea and shift their focus to a new attempt to encircle the main Ukrainian force in the east.
Meanwhile, on the wall of a school basement in the Ukrainian village of Yahidne, where residents say more than 300 people were trapped for weeks, names of the dead are scrawled on the walls. The accounts of residents here add to the growing testimony of suffering in the towns around Kiev during weeks of occupation by Russian forces.
This is a school basement in Yahidne, a village north of Kiev. On the peeling wall are names of the dead. Residents say more than 300 people were trapped for weeks here by Russian occupiers. Elena, a member of the village council, goes through the list. To the left of the door are scrawled the 7 names of people allegedly killed by Russian soldiers. To the right, 10 people who died because of the harsh conditions in the basement, she says.
This old man, he died first. He was transported to the boiler room. He laid there for 2 days. And later, when there was no more gunfire, we were allowed to move him back to his home.
A farming village of just 5 streets, Yahidne was a popular place for city folk from nearby Chernihiv to have a holiday cottage. It is now desolate. Residents say they were ordered into the basement with only brief breaks to relieve themselves or stretch their legs. They described sharing buckets for a toilet and took turns to sleep because there wasn't enough space for everyone to lie down. Tamara, a grieving mother who lost a son, says getting out after the Russians withdrew was like being born again.
It was very hard to breathe, especially in the room where I used to live, in the big one. There were no windows in there, so many people suffocated. It was very hard indeed. We were there from March the 5th to March the 30th.
The villagers say the Russian soldiers told them the confinement was for their own protection. The accounts of what happened in the village add to growing testimony from Ukrainian civilians of suffering in the towns around Kiev during the weeks of occupation by Russian forces following the invasion launched on February the 24th. Ukrainian authorities have accused Russia of war crimes following the unearthing of mass graves in towns around Kiev such as Bucha. Russia has denied allegations of extrajudicial killings, torture and abuse of civilians.
Away from the crisis in Ukraine, over in Somaliland, in response to the destruction caused by a blaze in Hargeisa, the United Nations has deployed an interagency team of technical experts to work with the government and the response committee to support the rebuilding of the marketplace. The blaze destroyed hundreds of businesses in the densely crowded market area as firefighters struggled to gain access to the flames.
More than a week has passed since a blaze destroyed the maiden market in Hargeisa. The impact of the devastating fire is still being felt, with many local business people reeling from its impact.
My boutique used to stock clothes. I used to sell all types of clothes. I used to feed my elderly parents as well as my daughters. In total, 10 people's livelihoods depended on my business. I was the only breadwinner for my family, and they depended on this boutique.
With an estimated 5,000 businesses ranging from large stores to small stalls, once located in the marketplace, Zainab is far from alone.
This business sustained many members of my family whose livelihoods directly depended on it. Today, as you can see, it's completely destroyed.
Located in central Hargeisa and spread out over 5 square kilometers, the Yahidne market was the largest market in Somaliland and the 4th largest in the Horn of Africa. It drew sellers and shoppers from the city and surrounding communities. Preliminary estimates of the total cost of losses incurred from the fire range between $1.5 billion to $2 billion. In response to the destruction, the United Nations deployed an interagency team of technical experts earlier this week to work with the government and the response committee to assess the damage and support the rebuilding of the marketplace.
The team has experts in environmental issues, legal issues, communication issues, and more importantly, socio-economic as well as health issues that will be working with the response committee that has been put up by the government of Somaliland to try and establish what areas need to be responded to.
Soon after arriving in Hargeisa, members of the team, along with representatives of other international partners such as the European Union, visited the location where they saw firsthand the extent of the damage and met business owners. Somaliland's Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture estimates that the fire accounted for 40 to 50% of the city's economy. The UN interagency team worked this week with the authorities on assessing what is needed to rebuild better. Local residents provided a ray of hope that along with international support, solidarity and unity will help the marketplace return to its central role in the city.
We are grateful for the work that's taking place, and we accept the support, both in terms of expertise, but also expecting and willingness that the UN agencies will be part of the immediate needs that we have. We spoke, we talk quite a lot. Now we need actions. And people are waiting these actions. And I'm sure that the UN agencies will be part of that.
I've seen a lot of mothers, a lot of fathers crying. They lost their wealth and whatever they had. And as a social worker, the only thing that I can do is help them and with the food, the drink, or whatever they want.
UN experts and local authorities will issue a joint assessment report. It will be used at a meeting of international donors taking place next week in Kenya. Somaliland declared independence from Somalia in 1991, but is not recognized as a state by the international community. Despite this, the region of 3 million people has maintained its own independent government, currency and security system.
When we return in just a moment, economic and humanitarian crisis cast shadow over first Ramadan in Afghanistan since the Taliban takeover. Please stay with us. You're still watching Foreign Dispatches on Channels Television. Rising prices, food shortages and a looming famine across Afghanistan have cast a shadow this year over the holy month of Ramadan, the first since the Taliban seized control of the country last year. The humanitarian situation in the country has worsened since last August, with the economy facing near collapse.
As Muslims in Afghanistan mark the holy month of Ramadan, the country's economic crisis is not far from most people's minds.
The difference between this Ramadan and those in the past, well, everyone is a witness and can see that compared to other years, the people's anticipation is less. Compared to other Ramadan, there are less preparations.
Prices have skyrocketed and the people's economic situation is weak in Afghanistan. You see, people have come to the market to buy necessities, but prices are so high. Many people who have come go back to their homes empty-handed.
This will be a different Ramadan for many Afghanis who are now under the rule of the Taliban following the chaotic withdrawal of US troops last August. The Director General of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Robert Mardini, describes the situation in Afghanistan as dire, with people having to sell their few belongings in order to put food on the table.
It's very difficult to have exact figures, but we see more and more people in the streets selling their few belongings to be able to put food on the table. We see more and more people seeking daily jobs. The situation is very dire. The economic system is at the brink of collapse. The vast majority of banks are not working. It's very hard for people to get funds. The vast majority of civil servants today in Afghanistan are simply not getting their salary. So you can imagine the ripple effect when a family relies on 8 members of a family rely on a salary, how hard daily life is for Afghans today.
He says that the current extreme situation in Afghanistan is attributed to a combination of factors, including warfares and climate change, and calls on the international community for more support.
Afghans have experienced 4 decades of armed conflict, repeated cycles of drought, putting their food security at risk. And I think it's fair to say that no family has been spared by the effect of war. And while the day-to-day security has improved over the past month, Afghans face acute needs in humanitarian, but also in socio-economic terms. And this is not the time for the international community to forget Afghanistan.
Following the hasty pullout, the U.S. government quickly froze nearly $9.5 billion in national foreign exchange assets from the Afghan central bank held in the United States, further aggravating the already dire humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. Last year, the United Nations World Food Programme warned that Afghanistan is facing an avalanche of hunger and destitution, with 98% of the population lacking adequate food.
Meanwhile, over in Senegal, Muslims also celebrating the holy month of Ramadan are feeling the pinch of inflation. Food prices in West Africa have increased by between 20 and 30% over the past 5 years, driven by a fall in production and availability.
In Senegal's capital, Dakar, our stew manding is preparing to break fast. But this year, there's no meat on the table. While Muslims celebrate the holy month of Ramadan, food prices in Senegal have been rising. And Yang says fish, much cheaper than meat in the ocean-facing West African country, is the only animal protein she can afford.
Food is so expensive during Ramadan, so I anticipated extra expenses. A day before Ramadan started, I bought food that were likely to increase in price, such as onions. When I went to the market and saw the increase in onion prices, I was reassured to have it in stock because I had anticipated it. It won't last until the end of the month, but it will last us a while.
Like many others, Mandiang turns to the kindness of strangers. A local association, Ndimbel Debut, which means family help in English, has been distributing food to families in need during Ramadan.
It is very hard. Can you imagine? We have no oil, we have no rice, we struggle to find food. And by the grace of God, we received this today. We did not expect it. We went to the market without being able to buy oil. If we were cooking dinner tonight, it would have been without oil. The shortage is real.
The association's president says the cost of a bag of rice has risen by 9.5% since last year.
Before Ramadan, a number of families contacted me. Some of them were crying, when they called me, and it's very difficult. The price of rice has gone up, same for sugar and oil, so it's very difficult.
Food prices across West Africa have increased by between 20 and 30% over the past 5 years. Aid agencies say that's driven by a fall in production and availability.
The situation is serious and dangerous because even the usual food for traditional consumption in Senegal are mostly imported. This means that today we're clearly dependent on external logistics. We're also clearly dependent on the rise in external prices. For example, the livestock that comes from Mali. But the crisis there and the ECOWAS sanctions, it clearly explains the rise in the price of meat at the market level because the livestock no longer crosses the borders.
Drought and conflict have pushed millions off farmland, while the global health crisis disrupted supply chains. In addition, the war in Ukraine has caused a spike in global food prices.
And finally on the program, let's head over to Ghana to meet the country's only glassblower, who says he's on a mission to reduce the country's glass waste and wasteful imports. Michael Tete built his own glassblowing studio in 2012 from scrap metal and clay bricks, and today produces dozens of pieces each week from recycled TV screens, window panes and soda bottles. Take a look.
Michael Tete, Ghana's only professional glassblower, clenched his teeth as he gripped a red-hot ball of molten glass. His burned and blistered hands bare against the steaming stack of wet newspaper he used to protect them. The 44-year-old toiled in the heat of scrap metal kilns burning at nearly 1,500 Celsius, loaded with melted window paint, TV screens and soda bottles. He would soon transform into elaborate vases swirling with psychedelic color. Some become red vases with streaks of black, others green pitchers and some clear everyday bottles.
Glass that I learned in the bead making, it became like my passion. It's like my heart. So all the time I want to blow glass. And glass is a wonderful work.
Tete's strict use of recycled materials, which he collects from scrap yards and landfills in the capital, Accra, is part of a stated mission to reduce Ghana's glass waste and what he considers wasteful imports. He envisions a Ghana free of foreign glass, having channeled its glass bead-making tradition into a modern, multifaceted industry. While some private companies recycle their glass, Tete says majority of Ghana's glass waste ends up either in landfills or scattered throughout the nation's streets, posing a safety hazard.
We don't have a collection process, and we don't want the broken glasses to be flowing around like that, or they will dump it in the landfill. And if we are using recycle, we can get money. Yes, as we want to recycle, recycle is cheap. You get, sometimes I buy the material from Accra, but it's not too expensive for me to buy, so that I can be able to use it, and after using that I can pay my staff.
Janice Ofe, 28-year-old and one of 8 women who Tete has taught, said that having the hot shop in town has been a game changer for some of Odumase Krobo's young people. It provided both a work opportunity and a creative outlet for people who had neither.
We are hoping maybe support will come and establish our business so that we can employ more youth. In our community, there is no, the youth, they don't have work to do. They are smoking, they are blah, blah, blah. So if we establish this job, they will get more work to do and they will not sit down in the house.
The team's work can be found in boutique shops in Ghana and Ivory Coast and has appeared in European and American art galleries.
Well, this is where we say goodbye till next time, but remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Bye for now.